Right, so the children have stayed in. What does that mean? There's no knowing. But it is an all-age bit of this service, which means there'll be times when some of you older ones think, I knew all that. And there'll be times when some of you younger ones think, I don't understand that. But at the end, maybe we'll get it all to hang together. Because I'm going to talk to you about this passage, which is written and the whole book of James, of Hebrews, explains to us a lot of things that God did to his people in the Old Testament and how he helped them to learn more about him. And so here, the writer is explaining that Jesus is the guarantee of a better covenant. Now, we've talked about covenants in weeks before, and covenants are just promises. Well, I say just promises. It means they're very special promises, and in this case, these are promises that God gave. And the writer is saying that Jesus has a permanent priesthood. And the people, you might think, well, what does all that mean? Well, he just launches into this discussion and assumes that the people understand, because he's writing to people who mostly were Jewish and had grown up understanding the Jewish culture and the Jewish history. And in the previous chapter, he's just pointed out there is a need for a modern equivalent of a high priest. The high priest was the most important religious person alive at the time when the tabernacle was up there. And we need someone who is perfect and pure and blameless. Oh, that means he's not really like us at all. And at this point in verse 1, if you look at it in chapter 8, he says, there is someone who meets the criteria, someone who has sat down at the right hand of God and who serves in the true tabernacle. So the writer is looking at the original tabernacle, the tent for worship, that Moses was instructed to build, and by comparing it with the situation that now exists. But he's telling us that the tabernacle was only a shadow or a copy of something that was to come. So there's something more important, and somehow the tabernacle explains that to us. Now, in the past, you understand when there were prophets. Prophets were people that God spoke to, and God said to them, here's a message for you, I want you to tell the people. So the prophet would go off and tell the message, and often it was a message people didn't want to hear, so prophets have quite a difficult time sometimes. But here, we learn that the tabernacle is pointing us towards something that would come in the future. Now, how can this happen? What was the tabernacle? Well, it was a big tent and a courtyard, but somehow this is going to point us to something in the future. It pointed to so long ago things that have now taken place, because in Moses' time a lot of the things that the tabernacle pointed to hadn't happened. But in a sense, we're looking back. So today I want us to look at the tabernacle a little and see what it was telling Moses and the people at the time, something they had to look forward to, and what it's telling us, and in a sense, we look back to it. So let's have a look and see what it means to us. Now, can we have the first slide? Oh, there we are. Good. Now then. So that's the tabernacle, and that's the way in. You've got 3 curtains there that are slightly different. Incidentally, I got this picture off the internet, and when I typed in tabernacle picture, I got a screen full of all different pictures. You wouldn't believe the ideas that people have got for what the tabernacle looked like. This was the best one I could find. The others obviously hadn't read the Bible, because the details are all there and the instructions are quite there. So that was the way in. This was a big altar where the animals that came for sacrifice were killed, and that was dealt with there. And this place here is 2 rooms. One of them is called the holy place, and that goes from about there to there. And the bit at the very end was called the Holy of Holies. That was a really special holy place. And that was where nobody ever went. You didn't go into the Holy of Holies. And there was all kinds of things that happened if you misbehaved in there. Only the high priest went in there once a year, and he went in there with a bowl of blood to sprinkle on a piece of furniture that was in there. That was called the mercy seat or the Ark of the Covenant. Now, let's just look at one or two things here. So this is all the way around. How high do you think that is? How high do you think it is? Hard to tell, isn't it? It's about 2.5 meters. So that's higher than you can look over. And that was deliberate, so that people couldn't stare in and see what was going on, and things couldn't stray in. So this was all the way around. Nobody got in by mistake. The only way in was in three gates here. That curtain was a different color, and they would take that curtain down, and people could go in. So if you went to make a sacrifice, you went in there with your animal, and you got this far, and then the priest would kill it, and you might have to stand by while he did it, and then that was it. You came out. So you didn't go in there to play around or anything like that. You went in that far, and then you came out again. And that was because God said, I am going to make my presence in there, and I am holy. You have to keep out. So the whole of that tabernacle, the whole arrangement was designed to say, keep out, keep away, God is holy, don't mess about, or you'll get into real trouble. Now, let's see how big it was. So can we have the next slide? That's the layout of this church, roughly. That's the hall that we all enjoy playing games in. And this is where I'm standing now. And this is the bit that you're all in. And this piece here is interesting, because that's the bit in there. Let's put the next slide up. Now, that's the layout of the tabernacle. Now, the first thing you can see, it's the other way around. So there's the outer court with all its white curtains. That's the two rooms together. And this one here is the Holy of Holies. So do you want to see what they both look like? Let's compare the size together. Oh, well, there's something that's interesting. So the tabernacle is roughly about the same length as going from the window here down to the end of the games room. And the width is just about the same width as the games room. But you notice that this part here, and the Holy of Holies was at the other end of the tabernacle. Interesting. So whereas churches normally look east, the tabernacle actually faced the other way around. But the interesting thing is that the Holy of Holies is not that different to this bit here, which is where the impact groups sit later on afterwards. So I thought that was interesting. And seeing as it's almost the same size, we need something to partition it off. So we'll do this. And then we'll do this one. You'll have to imagine now that the place I'm in is where nobody can go except the high priest once a year. So all we need now is a high priest. Who's a good high priest? He must be tall, must be a man, or come on, hands up for a volunteer. Come on, Ethan. You know what Blue Peter said. This is one I prepared earlier. Good. Now then, Ethan, you're already getting close to being a high priest because you've got a turban on. So we imagine this is a turban. So that's the first thing. Now what you've got to do is you have to take blood from a sacrifice. All right, it looks all right, this, doesn't it? Right? And you're going to put your fingers in that, but figuratively. And then you've got to go behind there and sprinkle that on the mercy seat. That was the lid on top of the altar. So if you hold that, let's see. Yeah, it's all right. Don't spill it. And don't go anywhere yet. No, you definitely can't go anywhere. You need a white coat. You've got to be pure and clean and white. And this is going to be perhaps the first of the problems. All right, here we go. So you need to put this on. A high priest. Shall I hold that? I'll give it you back when the time comes. Yeah. Right. How are we doing? All right. Not a bad fit, that. Are you in? Right. This doesn't have buttons because it was designed for people who work in the food industry. So you have to be really clean and... Oh, okay. Right. Oh. That's why you put your hands in your pockets. You don't have pockets otherwise. We need to fasten you somehow. Come on, just focus on. That's it. Good. Right. Right. So does this get you ready for going in there? Well, nearly. But so let's see. Here we go. Now, oh no, you're not right yet. You see, when you go in there, it's so holy and special that if you make a mistake, you may get struck dead. Right? So we need to be certain that when you go in there, nobody else can see. So the robe that you've got actually has got bells all around the hem, but I haven't got any bells. That's a wind chime, but that'll do. All right? So there we go. Pardon? The bulldog clip on the end. Hold it on there now. Let's get you looking smart, because it's very important to go in and do the... Yeah, look at the part. Oh, dear me. Right. Okay. Now then. So as you move around in there, nobody can see. There's a curtain across there, and once the high priest goes in, we want to know if it's going to be all right. So jiggle about a bit. You can just hear the tinkling. So on the high priest's gown was a row of bells all round the bottom. As he moved, the bells jingled, and the priests outside who were in the bigger piece said, "Oh, good, he's still alive." That's what it was there for. And then some bright spark said, "Oh, what happens if he does something wrong and God strikes him dead? We can't rush in there and get him out because we're not allowed in." So the next thing was, what should we do with this? You what? We'll tie round his foot. Yes, we're not tight round your neck. Okay. Thanks, he said. Right, now then. This is all right, because if he goes in there and he does something wrong and God strikes him dead, when he falls over, we can pull him out. See, right? And that's what they did. So he got this great long rope to pull him out. Are you comfortable about going in there? Yeah. Yes, I wouldn't be. Right, so let me see. Right, can we give you this blood to go and do the deed? Okay. Right. Now there's just one thing. The stipulation was that the clothes you wear had got to be of fine white linen, and they had just to have been washed. Does that fit? Yeah. What? Yeah. No, I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. Right. And the other thing, which is even more embarrassing, is, have you had a bath since lunchtime? No, well, you definitely can't go in, okay? So it was very kind of you to try. You don't qualify, okay? Take it all off. Does anybody want to drink this? No. What is it? It's tomato ketchup mixed with water, so it really is okay. Thanks very much, Ethan. So, yes, we'd better bring that all the way back before something goes wrong. So you can see that being a high priest, everybody looked up to you, but it was a job that had potentially really serious consequences. Because the tabernacle was saying, you don't come in here into the holy place where God is dwelling. You don't come anywhere near, because if you do and you do it wrong, that's it. There were one or two other things about this special holy place in there. There was only one piece of furniture. No chairs. No sitting around. The other strange thing is, did you see any windows in the tabernacle? Where are the windows in the tabernacle? Can you see the windows? That's where the holy place is, and there are skins hanging, there are curtains hanging over there and there. There's nothing at the back. There are no windows. So the high priest is going through a curtain into a place with no windows, and he has to do something that's very important and get it right. So how did he see what he was doing? That's an interesting question. You can think about that. I'm not going to give you all the answers today. God says, I am holy. And the tabernacle was a picture to the people of Israel about how they were to deal with God. God says, you are not fit to stand in my presence. And so even the high priest, when he went in there once a year, was really scared. He had to do all the ritual. He had to make sure he'd done everything properly. He had to make atonement for himself and offer a sacrifice. And on that one day a year, when he went in, he sprinkled the blood on the mercy seat, and God said, I forgive the people. And all the people said, great. The Day of Atonement was a wonderful day, because suddenly, at that point, they're all forgiven. Well, it was okay until they made a mistake, or until they sinned again, and then the whole thing began again. What are you doing? I'm waiting for the next Day of Atonement. Or I bring an animal, and it's killed and offered to God as a kind of I'm sorry present for doing something wrong. You know, I think we forget what it meant when they brought a bull for an offering. You can imagine Father doing something bad, and he brings the bull, and they take it to the altar in the middle there, and the priest kills it. So can you imagine the two lads that, Dad, what are you doing with the bull? Oh, I'm taking the bull. Where are you taking it? Well, I'm going to the priest at the top. Oh, Dad, not again. What have you done? Well, that's between me and but it's going to be yeah, it's going to be. But Dad, that's the best one we've got. You can't. And they took it, and to get his sin covered, the bull had to be killed. And the boys came on and said, oh, I can't. We're farmers. How can we manage if he keeps getting our best bull killed? Don't bother about bulls now, do you? But how would you feel if one day your dad came in and said, I think it's time I ask for forgiveness for something I've done wrong, and I'm going out in the car. Where are you going? I'm going to Rockcliffe. And Rockcliffe? Yeah. And what are you going to do there? Well, if I'm quick, I can drive it through the hedge, over the cliff, into the River Eden. But I'll get out first. So he did that. And he takes the car, and he drives it through the hedge, and the car goes off the cliff, into the River Eden, bang, finished, no good. And he comes back and says, that's my thank you present to God, because I've done something wrong. Dad? That was what it meant for the Old Testament people to kill a bull. Or, if you weren't so rich, to kill a ram or a sheep. They were worth a lot of money, and it was an important way for God to illustrate how serious it was when you do something wrong. So God was trying to bring it home to them. Now then, how did Moses know what to build in the tabernacle? Well, it was very important. God said, I'll give you instructions. So I brought some instructions from when I used to be an apprentice. We used to have drawings this big to make things. And there were two kinds of people. There were people who did the drawings. They called them draftsmen. It's funny now, right? Like draftsmen, okay. And the men who made it, who were the mechanics or the craftsmen. So the draftsman drew it, and the craftsman made it. And at the corner here, you've got what it is. So this one is a steel boiler. All right, it's a real drawing, this. And the man who made its name is there, and the date he made it. Oh, and there's something here. It says, RW and LW refers to the view from the firebox end towards the smoke box. It's a boiler. So that's what it says there, special instructions. And God, when he made special instructions, are very important. Let's have one. What does that mean? That's what you might see on a drawing. What does it mean? All dims in. Come on, boys, any ideas? What does it mean? What? The boy's got a funny voice. All the dimensions are in millimeters, right? So instead of going round every drawing and putting mum after a number, they put a note on the bottom that says all dimensions. Let's have another one. What does that mean? Mat 316. Mat 316. Charlie, tell him. Material is 316 stainless steel. Stainless steel doesn't rust and it's not magnetic, so they... Right, let's have another one. Ah, yes. Now then. Haha. None of you know this one. When I was an apprentice, I worked in a drawing office and we had a relatively new draftsman, and he was always complaining that when he put it down in his drawings down in the workshop, the experienced craftsman in the workshop said, oh no, it's another one of his. Well, we'll not do it like that. We'll make this one there, and that'll go, yeah, that'll be fine. And he got fed up with this. So in the next drawing that went down, on top of the little box, it had MILTD 41. And it got down in the workshop, and the foreman said, oh, what's this mean? MILDT 41. And they got, what's it? No, I don't know what it is. Do you know? No, I don't know what it is. So he went back up to the drawing office, and he said to the draftsman, he said, hey, what does MILDT 41 mean? And the draftsman said to him in a very loud voice, so all the drawing office could hear, make it like the drawing for once. Right. You had to get your own back on the craftsman somehow, but they managed it that time. Moses had some instructions, didn't he? His instructions came from God. The passage we read said that see to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown on the mountain. So there it is. Thank you. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I told you. That was God's instruction to Moses. And you think, why was it so important to make it exactly like God had told him? And if you want some fun, go back into Exodus and read chapters 25 and around there, all the details about making this tabernacle, because there was lots of them, and it was really good. And you read all the experts that they had, the craftsmen that God appointed to make this tabernacle just like God had said. Now, why was God being so picky about the way this thing was put together? Well, there's some real instructions here that give us clues to the future that God had it planned. And they point us towards Jesus and the way it was going to work. So, let's look at the next picture. Again, please. That's it. Now then, this is a different picture, but you see it's the same tabernacle. This one has a bit where the curtains here are drawn back so you can see what's going on in there. Let's have the next slide and we'll see. Right, so that's it enlarged. So here is the holy place, and you can see a table in there, and there are loaves of bread on there, and a lampstand here, and here, in here, this is the Holy of Holies, and that is the Ark of the Covenant. And that's all that was in there. And to keep people out, or to stop them seeing what they shouldn't see, there's a curtain across here. But this one, this curtain across here, was really special. It was called the veil. And nobody went past there. The priests could come in here and work. They had to come in each day to light the lamps and put bread on the table. But going into there was out. That was out of bounds, off limits. Nobody goes in there except the high priest once a year after he's done loads of things to make sure he's all right. And he goes in with a little bowl of blood and makes atonement. That curtain is really important, and God gives us some instructions. Listen what he says in Exodus 26. Make a curtain of blue and purple and scarlet yarn and finely twisted linen with cherubim worked into it by skilled craftsmen. So this big curtain, God says it's got to be blue and purple and scarlet, and finely twisted linen, which was white. And what does it tell us? Well, if you go on into the next chapter or two of Hebrews, in chapter 10, verse 20, this curtain is described as representing Jesus. Well, they hadn't heard of Jesus when the tabernacle was built, but the tabernacle built by Moses to God's instructions is pointing us towards Jesus. Right, let's look at these colors. Blue. What do you think of, children, when I say what's blue? What's the big thing that's blue? Who said that? Sky, said a voice. You're right. So it's the sky. So blue speaks of the man from heaven. It speaks of his deity. Purple. What do you think of when someone is dressed in purple? A big purple robe. Royalty. Okay? Jesus, we know, is a king, and the royal and the purple speaks of his kingship and authority. What about scarlet or red? What's that the color of? I didn't hear that. What's that the color of? Yes, blood, right. So the scarlet tells us of the humanity of Jesus. People have blood in them, and it talks about humanity. So these three colors, red, blue, and purple, are woven together on a basis of linen. Now, the linen that they made in those days, we know from the Egyptians of the time, they could make linen so fine and weave it so well that it looked like silk. And you could only tell the difference by looking at it through a magnifying glass. But the linen was white. Now, who can remember where the Bible talks about people who are clothed in white? And it says that they are, the last book in the Bible talks about the saints, some of them that have been beheaded. They say, when are you going to do something about us being beheaded, God? And John saw the picture, and the saints were told to go back and wait. But in the meantime, they were clothed with fine white linen, which is their righteousness that God has given them. So we're getting quite a lot from this. We've got blue, purple, scarlet, now white linen. And the cherubims. Well, what are the cherubims? There's cherubims all over on this cloth. And the cherubims interwoven throughout speak of the servants of God. That is, the angels who were charged with making sure that when Jesus was alive, he was kept safe. And Satan knew this. Do you remember the temptation that Satan gave to, one of the temptations to Jesus? He said, jump off the temple, because why? Nothing will happen, for he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. And so that single item, that curtain there, speaks to us of the Lord Jesus because of the colors and what was woven onto it. Now, all those things, that curtain particularly, said, keep out. The tabernacle said, keep out of God's presence on pain of death. But the new covenant says, when Jesus came, he didn't say keep away. He said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And what happened when Jesus died on the cross? You see, although the tabernacle wasn't there, the temple that had been built still had the Holy of Holies, and it still had a curtain in front of it. And the curtain had the same pattern as the one that was given to Moses. And when Jesus died, that curtain that kept people away from the holy presence of God suddenly was torn from the top. It was as if somebody had got hold of it at the top and torn it, and the rip went right down, and the curtain fell away. And the priest said, "Oh no, everybody can see inside." And that was exactly what it was meant to be. It was a wonderful picture of what the tabernacle had prophesied or foretold, that we now have a better high priest. Not chosen from men. He doesn't have to go in with a sacrifice, with a bowl of blood. Jesus, when he goes into God's presence, he takes his own blood. He goes because of, not on the basis of an animal he's killed, but he goes on the basis of his own death. And where does he go? Well, Hebrews tells us, the passage we read says, he goes to the heavenly sanctuary. Now, this is really special. That sanctuary at the end of the tabernacle was a room not much bigger than the one behind me. And there was only one thing in it. And they were frightened to go in there because it was the presence of God. But Hebrews tells us that Jesus, because of his death, is our great high priest. He's different from anybody else. He doesn't have to wear special clothes. He doesn't have to worry about going into the presence with a rope around his ankle in case he's done something wrong. He goes back into the presence of God in heaven, and he says, "My work is finished." And God says, "Yes, it is. Come in and here, sit with me on my right-hand side. This is the place that's reserved for you." In the tabernacle on earth, there's no chair. Nobody sits in the presence of God. But Jesus has finished the work God gave him to do, and in heaven, he sits beside God. He goes into the presence of the awesome, fearsome, mighty God of the universe, and he is not scared in the least. He goes in with total confidence because he is accepted, and he sits down at the right-hand side, the place of absolute power and authority. Nothing equals that. Nothing even comes close. Jesus said to his disciples, "All authority on heaven and earth has been given to me." And now he sits in heaven, our great high priest, and his work is complete. Andrew told us this morning, but I finished my notes last night. There was a point in Jesus' ministry when people found his teaching too hard to cope with, and many of them stopped following him. "Are you leaving too?" said Jesus to his disciples. And the reply of the Apostle Peter still rings down through the ages. "Lord," said Peter, "to who can we go? You have the words of eternal life." The message of Hebrews is that Jesus is better. Stick with Jesus. The death of Jesus makes it possible for us to go into the presence of God without all the rigmarole that the high priest had to go through. We can go in, and God welcomes us, not because we're good, we're dirty, like that illustration that you saw before. Our hands are unclean, and we need forgiveness. And God forgives us, not because we go and kill an animal, but because we come to Jesus and say, "Lord, I am sorry for the things I've done wrong." And we get access to God, and he becomes our friend. Who else do you want as your best friend?